And this is very important. This is a paradigm shift for designers to think when they design how that influence their users. And if that is happened, I guess we're done. We get very much forward.
Welcome to Unhinged Podcast. So glad to have you here with us. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your invitation. And I do hope that we have a very good podcast today with you.
I hope so. I hope so. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you do?
This is Kaveh Fattahi from Iran. I'm an associate professor of an academician from Shiraz University, which is located in the in the southern parts of Iran, let's say. And I've graduated from Japan. I've been there for like 6 years, both studying and teaching architecture in Hokkaido University in Japan. It's about 15 years that I've returned back home here in Shiraz, in my childhood city. And I'm teaching architecture and urban design to the students, both graduate and postgraduate students here. And it's about a decade, exactly 8 years and something, that I've founded a laboratory in Shiraz University called Tech Lab, which is more focused on neuroarchitecture and how our surrounding environments can influence our brain and body. And now I'm the founder and director of that, and I was teaching this stuff to the students.
Okay. I always want to know why people do what they do. Why did you choose architecture? Why urban planning? Why did you want to go into others?
Okay, this is very, let's say, repeated story, because I've asked this question from my students, and each time I got to know that maybe me and the other designers and architects going in the same path, repeating and repeating this. From childhood, we start to play with these logos, make something and design something, putting everything together. And step by step, we are getting more curious about how we can design and how our surrounding environments also are being designed and set together. And step by step, these, I used to call it a fire inside my heart, the fire of, I don't know, this flame of designing everything. And that grows and grows and grows. And somewhere, because in Iran we have an entrance exam to enter universities, and it is very competitive. And then I found myself that I've applied for architecture and design, and all my 10 first selection was architecture. And here I am, an architecture faculty here at Shiraz University.
Awesome. So with the work that you do at Tech Lab in neuroarchitecture, right? We know like words have come and they have become popular. They become like the in thing, the buzzword and everything, like green architecture, sustainability, and all that. So it's
True.
neuroarchitecture now. How would you define neuroarchitecture beyond the hype and buzzword and all that?
That's true. After these 15 years in academia and both in the architectural firms, I got to know that, as you mentioned, every now and then, some new trends become very popular between designers, starting with, I don't know, as you mentioned, green design, eco design, and then going to the resiliency, and then nowadays neuroarchitecture, which becomes the mainstream, it seems. And more people are going to that. But for me, neuroarchitecture is not another trend. Maybe like sustainable architecture, that maybe it's not on the mainstream right now, but designers and architects start to get curious about their context, their surrounding environments, how environments affect and climate affect our design. This is more or less now very common between designers, that they should think about the context, like a text that sits on the context. But though maybe it is not on the mainstream, but designers get to know that. Neuroarchitecture is not different, I guess. It's about how our surrounding environments influence and affect our thinking, our feeling, our behaving in space. And even if that wave comes up and down, what it brings with itself is that a new perspective, a new thinking for designers, that they should care about what they design, how they design, and how that influence their participants, their users. And it is very important. So for me, it's not a buzzword or a wave. Maybe a wave, but I hope that has some big influence on the designers. Or that's I wish. That's what I
Awesome.
wish.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So at what point does architecture stop being like a backdrop and it start becoming like an active participant in the human cognition, human behavior, and all that?
True, I do believe that starting from the first time that humans start to make something as a shelter for themselves, they always knew that what they design influence their behavior. Here in Iran, as a very old and I don't know cradle of civilization, let's say, as it was mentioned, it was named. We have several caves within the mountains and hilarious spaces, which belongs to I don't know 10,000 as the inhabitants. And we start to ask why this cave has been selected for living and the others was not. And then researchers, scholars started to understand that maybe this moon and the wind and the sunlight and daylight and all these things affect and influence how they select those spaces. So I do believe from the beginning they start to know deep inside their hearts, designers, that their design is important. But step by step, from a passive actor, they start to become a complete actor. They are not neutral anymore. And they start to know that, oh, maybe what we design affect our memory, our creativity, our learning. And this is where exactly we see a turning point. And every turning point, if you ask me, come with the tools and devices. So to um, burn the candle, I would say that maybe for me the turning point is when these cognitive performance started to become measured and sensed by devices like electroencephalography, functional MRI, I don't know, eye tracking, biosensors. These help designers to understand their design's influence clearly and more vividly. And this is for me a turning point from becoming changing from somehow passive to actor to active actors.
Ah, okay. No, that's understandable, I suppose. So how do we now say there are like specific principles that must guide designs, or there you we should like look at it as a holistic view of it?
True. Architecture is, if you ask me, architecture is quite complex. And what we design have several outcomes and have several influence on several, let's say, factors. Uh, just before we mention about how sustainability and these kind of green and eco-friendly designs make us think that our design affects our ecosystem. So this is one way, and the other way is just started to flourish and improve, and it is that our design influence our brain and body. So we should also care about that, because every steps, every sketch of us as designers and architects is not neutral. It may influence somebody's I don't know, cognitive performance, learning. Even our spaces can restore or distract or even heal or cure people. So it is important to understand these staffs as well. So from now on, I'm quite sure that starting from, I don't know, 2003, which ANFA is being launched in San Diego, designers start to also check the impact and influence of their designs on their participants. And this is the biggest step forward.
Mm. I think that's what needs to be done at this point. We need to design with that in mind, that what we do affects how we behave and how we feel, and how we react and respond to everything around us.
I can't agree more. You are very right in that point. And this is very important.
Mm.
This is a paradigm shift for designers to think when they design how that influence their users. And if that is happened, I guess we're done. We get very much forward. And then maybe another paradigm will appear after sustainability and
Oh,
neuroarchitecture, when we are going to see another perspective of our design that may influence something. And this is for me a holistic one. Something for me, architecture is some steps to make us human, to live better, and to become better humans. That is the ultimate goal for me. Okay, so as a holistic is that everything that we do is to for me appear to be part of this holistic view that we should make human better.
so how do you then balance empirical neuroscience research with intuition and lived human experiences? Because you cannot take away from that part where people have, lived through certain experiences, and they feel some type of intuitive in a way. So how do you balance that research with intuition and lived human experience?
Yeah, and that is the hard point, especially for designers and architects. I don't know about Africa, but here in Iran, architecture students usually select mathematics and not biology. And then they start to go to another field of study. So these biological things in their neurons, cells, I don't know, brain, and this kind of stuff sometimes make them afraid. But so this is, for them it is another world. So what we do is that to connect these two, uh, definitely at the beginning seems separated, but we know now that they are very much connected and integrated disciplines together. And then maybe after that we start to understand the real neuroarchitecture, these neurological responses, these kind of stuff. So for me as a faculty, I try to connect these two disciplines together, the scientific and neuroscience to the architecture and design, which is one with working with the intuition and the creativity and these kind of stuffs, and the other one working with rigid numbers and data and these kind of stuffs as well. So these are should be connected if we want a holistic view of architecture.
Everything is quite interlinked, really. We can't work with one from another. It has to come together like that.
True, it's very much interconnected. Sorry,
Mm,
because as
yeah,
humans we are very much complex creatures, and everything may, I don't know, somehow affect our lives and our behavior.
that's true. So in your view, how does sustainable design now contribute to the psychological health, not just environmental, performance? Because sometimes when you talk about sustainable design and ecology and all those things, you are more focused on the environmental aspect part and not really on the human uh, effects of it or impact of it.
True. Okay. For me, the sustainability is derived from the verb to sustain. Okay. And for some
Yeah.
time, we just think that we should sustain our nearby and surrounding environments. But what about if we zoom out and see the big picture? And then maybe it's not about just sustaining the environments, but also sustaining the humans, the users that are living in that context. And then sustainability get a bigger, I don't know, more improved understanding. So in that sense, sustainability is not something that contradicts neuroarchitecture, but they are interrelated to help people sustain their mental well-being, sustain their physical health, and then this is the same, I guess.
So it's two peas in one pod: sustainability, neuroarchitecture, and all that. Okay.
True,
So,
true.
so, where do we now draw the ethical line between designing for well-being and manipulating behavior in space?
Wow. Okay, that is very interesting question. Let's say because suppose that if you have the sloped ceiling in classrooms, what may happen is that you have the enhanced learning. Okay, suppose that this is proven. Then, as a designer, can we make learning mandatory for every student of us? This is a line that's we should. I mean, that these ethical things also happen because when we know that space affect and influence our brain and body, then the next question is that to some extent, to what extent we as designers can make everything mandatory and I don't know, maybe frame this flexibility of human beings. That is maybe what neuroethics and these kind of disciplines try to understand. So yeah, you are right. As much as we gain data about how space affects our environments, then maybe another mainstream may comes that manipulate these understanding to frame the human behavior, and that is of course what not neuroarchitecture seeks or should not
So to
seek.
everything, yeah, for sure. So to everything that's done, there has to be at least codes or guiding lines of how it should be implemented so that it's not corrupted.
True, very true. Yeah, that's very true. And in each discipline, that happens that when you made or make something mandatory, then this corruption happens. But then it's out of the stream that it is targeted for. So sometimes I afraid this neuroarchitecture. Yes, the more we knew about our brain and body,
Yeah.
the more I'm afraid that what would happen, these artificial intelligence are becoming very mainstream. And whatever we do, now we know that whatever we do in this world, we remain some data shadow. And if these data shadow of us are in bad hands, what would happen to us? So for me, it's like, I don't know if you see the Westworld series, which is a movie, the series in which these AI started to capture the algorithm of human behaviors, and they start to forecast what do they do next, and then after that they start to make people do these kind of stuff. Okay, so this is of course maybe happen the more we know about brain and put this idea in bad hands. Uh, that can be dark. But let's hope for the brighter side of the neuroarchitecture, which help people live
Yeah.
better. That is the same for
So
every science. Every science is
yeah,
working
yeah.
like a knife that can be worked as a, I don't know, killing devices, and at the same time in the surgeon hands that can be acted as a, I don't know, the curing and healing devices. Science is like a flame, as I mentioned at the beginning.
In the context of materiality, right? How does now the kind of materials that we use communicate with the nervous system, especially natural materials or you know materials that we are sustainable versus synthetic ones?
Yeah, true. I guess we cannot prescribe a similar prescription for every material. Each material, if being used in the proper, I don't know, part and the proper proportion, the proper context, they can act very good. And it is very much cultural, because I remember that I read research there back in Japan, that they started to blindfold people, and then they made people touch several materials, including marbles, including, I don't know, platinum, including woods. And then they start to know that when Japanese touch these wood things, because many things in Japan are if you travel or visit Japan, you understand that many things in Japan are made out of woods, the chopsticks, the tatami, these shoji, and these kind of stuffs. And they start to understand that the amygdala of these participants, surveyed participants, start to disactivate, which means that they produce less cortisol. And of course, less cortisol means less stress. So we do this in Iran with another research, and we got to know that maybe this mud and brick act similarly, because many things here in our houses are made not out of wood but out of bricks and earthen architecture. So it is very much cultural, and that's what I think this cultural neuroscience is very much important. So we should not prescribe a similar prescription for every humans there back in the world. And this is the interesting thing about neuroarchitecture. You see, it has a very bright side as well.
And it's so broad, actually. It's
Yeah,
so broad. It's so broad that, you know, there's so much involved that you can't talk. I mean, right now we're just talking about bits and pieces and here and there. But maybe at a later stage we might come back and, you know, narrow it down to such a specific topic within the neuroarchitecture. But right now we're just touching bits, and, you know, for my audience to at least get a glimpse of what is this ginormous animal that we are dealing with now?
true, true.
um, so how does, you were talking about the cultural impact, you know, of the material part of everything. So now, how does the local climate influence the neurological comfort and emotional regulation in design?
True. This is also very important. Till now, starting from 1970s, that this sustainability and eco and green architecture start to flourish. We started to have several rating systems and evaluation systems, including LEED, including BREEAM, including DGNB in Germany, including Green Star in different countries. And all of these guidelines, although very helpful, just start to understand the human similarly. So they put that, okay, the thermal comfort zone for you is something between this and that. But starting with neuroarchitecture, maybe we can make it go further and start to know, because it very much depends on the lived experiences of people. I'm quite sure that the weather or the thermal degree that you in Africa maybe find it very comfortable is not very similar with Finland, let's say in Scandinavia, or maybe in Iran. I remember that 2 or 3 years ago, exactly 3 years ago, we visited Finland. We had I was an instructor invited by Aalto University in the Finland, and we had a shared workshop between Iranians, Japanese, and Finnish students. That was very productive and fruitful workshop. But in the first day, we stayed in a cottage, and my students start to mention that, wow, it's very unbrighty for us. It's very dark for us. The lighting. So I got to know that the lighting, even the lighting and the lumen and the lux, which is for different places, may be understood differently. By that, I try to mention that even lighting, starting the daylight, the artificial lighting, the cooling and this warming, have different impacts on different people's brain. They are not similar. Of course, we have like 70% similarity between how these paradigms affect human minds, but some of them are depending on the lived experience. And we should take credit to these lived experiences. And this is exactly where cultural neuroscience or cultural neuroarchitecture should be started to be recognized.
I believe it's quite a huge impact because everything is according to context at the end of the day, you know.
True. True.
Now, can we say emotional resilience can be designed into the climate adaptive architecture?
Yeah, of course, we can mention that. Because this is now proved that our surrounding environments influence and affect our emotions. And okay, so if that is the case, when we are talking about surrounding environments, we are not just talking about forms, materials, shapes, colors. We are talking about also these thermal and illuminational layers as well. The space is consisted of all these layers together, and every one of them may impact and influence our emotions. There is an interesting research one of my students did here, and in that we have a lab settings in which the weather is completely the same. So we invited students to come and participants to come, and we asked them to fill a questionnaire in which they mentioned that the environment is very is somehow cold, not very cold, but somehow cold. And we asked them to go out, and then we changed the color of the lighting, not the weather. It is interesting, not the weather and the degree, but just the color. And we invited them back to the office, and then we asked them to refill the questionnaires. And this time, just by changing the color of the lighting, they feel now it's very much good. It's not cold again. So these factors, what I mean is that interconnected. They should not be understood or recognized separately. It's a holistic. All of these together may impact, and we start to understand this. So yes, of course, as they impact our feelings, they may impact our emotional regulation and emotion as well.
Okay. This is interesting. This is so interesting. Um, Now, do you think globalized design trends are disconnecting people from spatial familiarity and psychological safety? Like, there's so much going on in the world, and everything is moving at fast pace, and it's changing. It's everything is constantly changing. So, are these things that are termed as trends every year in year out, disconnecting people from the spatial familiarity and its psychological safety?
Yeah, everything goes very, fast. That's very right. Um, I do think that if somebody asked me 20 years ago that, hey, Kaveh, you should study brain anatomy and brain function as a designer, I would say that no way. That's why I select design and not biology. But now here I am. And I asked my students, though at the beginning they may not like it, but starting from reading and getting in touch with neuroscientists, psychologists, and both the scholars and students, they now understand and recognize the importance of knowing these staffs as important paradigms. So it is like the third year that they're back in my design studio course. I invited a psychologist, a neurocognitive scientist, and a neuroscientist, and even one artificial intelligence researcher to our laboratory. And we work together because we think that as designers, if we just focus on okay, the neuroscience has evolved rapidly. Suppose that this is in parentheses, I say. 20 years ago, they think that this prefrontal cortex of minds is called as the silent lobe. And they thought that it has no functions. But now this is the shining star of cognitive performance, uh, changing from something believed to be zero impact to I don't know 90-80% of our cognitive performance, and just in 2 decades with this Mr. H sample that they did in lesion studies. So the neuroscience has changed, and if we do not work together with these neuroscientists, these psychologists, then we started to get back and going those kind of materials that are outdated. So I think that we should sit together as a whole team and started to evolve together. That is my suggestion for not becoming outdated.
Yeah, but it's always not easy to bring non-architects into the architectural world. Like, how do you merge the technical part of it with the, social and, emotional aspect of it?
Yeah, that is very true. I understand it from my bones. Because at the beginning, when I invited them and I asked our dean in the university, in the faculty, that I want to invite a neuroscientist to our class. And he thought that, oh, something happened? Is somebody's brain doesn't work properly? What do you want to ask to invite him? And then I said, no, 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 this is something else. I know at the beginning it was hard, and still it is hard. But the most important thing is that to find a shared language. Now, my students, when sitting with a neuroscientist, of course, they are not neuroscientists. They don't know these detailed things, but they can talk about these brain plasticity, neurogenesis, and how brain functions and how brain connectivity may change according to being immersed in different environments. So I think finding a shared language is the most important thing. And as you pointed out, it is not easy, but it is inevitable. We should go. If we want to have a holistic view of architecture, we have to do this.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So, how might neuroarchitecture reshape how we design cities, not just, buildings? Because when we're talking neuroarchitecture, we might think it's contained to buildings, yet it's a huge, topic that includes everything else. So, how can it reshape how we design cities also?
That is very true. Again, this is going to a zoom out perspective. We can just select the building and try to understand how that influence our brain and body, which is the neuroarchitecture, is seeking. But also we can zoom out the whole perspective, and we find that okay, these buildings are sitting to each other near the natural environments and man-built environments, and this is also impact our life. There are many interesting research being conducted in different neuro urban laboratories in the world. One that I just come up to my mind is that we got to know that the people who live in the CBD, Central Business District, or the more populated parts of the cities, are more sensitive to depression and Alzheimer. And the people who are living in the outskirts of the cities with being immersed within more natural environments, it is harder for them to have these depression things. So, okay, and then some. It is another one research. The other research find out that having these natural environments, pocket gardens, and pocket parks within the more populated part of the city help people have to regulate their stress, to have better feelings and better cognitive performance. So of course that may influence. This is just some examples. There are, of course, there are many research being done conducted on this called neurourbanism. But to answer your
Yes.
question, I think that also we should also think about the larger scale, which are the cities, and there are many interesting topics there as well.
In that you were talking about, how people who live in urban areas, more developed urban areas, are prone to depression. And with the world that we live in, that is driven by fear, that is driven by anxiety, and a lot of this, bad vices that eventually shape our cities. So what would you say that says about the societies that are producing them? Like what the impact that that's the emotions that are currently, in the wave around the world. How do they influence the shaping of cities, and what does that say about the societies that are producing them?
Okay, I think that as an architect, what I think is that while we are referring to several standards, like I don't know, Neufert standards, this time server, this proportion, and also the sustainability guidelines, we need also some neuroarchitecture appendix and guidelines to be happened and be attached to every urban interventions as well. We should give credits to how our cities influence its users. And starting from there, I guess something good may happen, and then maybe we just not think about the economical issues, which is of course important, not climatological issues, which is of course important, but also the users' mental well-being, physical well-being, and also this emotional, cognitive, and perceptual actions and performances as well. Um, so we need some guidelines in that sense as well. We should think that urban environments are not neutral as well. They were very much influence our well-being and behavior.
Because I usually hear that, architecture is political. It's not just neutral. So somehow it influences much of the behaviors, much of the way we perceive, even though we may not be aware, the way we perceive other people and the way we perceive the world as a whole. So
True.
yeah.
Very much true. So the architecture does not impact our individual behavior only, but also it influences our social behavior, social interactions. And this is where we are going to more larger spaces, like public spaces, like the streets, where people gather, where move. And these environments also affect our both individual and affect us both individually and socially. And this is very important. The very simple sample would be if you put two chairs in front of each other, you make people sit in front of each other, talk to each other. Maybe something's happen. I mean, a chemistry between these two happens. And if you put these chairs somewhere else that they cannot see each other, maybe on the back of the others, you make people not to interact. So this is very simple sample, but of course you can go further and further with more level of development and details that may influence people. You see a tree and you will not see a tree. This is two different environments. One important thing is that another interesting research in public spaces that they started to research on humans, then they understand that peoples and those surveyed participants in that research, they feel much better when they are in the environments that they can hear the water sounds and also the bird sounds. Okay? But more interestingly is that they feel much, much better if they can hear different birds' voices. Because evolutionary thinking in those environments, humans start to think that it is a safer place to live because you see that bird lives, the other one also lives, so of course I can live. Okay, this is something deep in our mind. But when we're thinking
Yeah.
about different birds' voices, we are thinking about having different trees because each tree corresponds to some birds. So in an environment that we have this divergence in the trees plantation, that affects our mind. So these are very interesting research. At least for me, these are very interesting. I don't know for the others,
Yeah,
but I do love
definitely.
this.
It is interesting.
Yeah.
I guess it answers the next question, because the next question was going to be, how does constant visual and spatial simulation shape the way our cities grow? And when you talk about this divergence that people need to experience, it answers that. Could now urban sprawl and hyperdensity be symptoms of conflicting cognitive needs and environment?
True, of course, um, of course that that has some influence. Suppose that you are in an environment which is very complex and everything are not in order. What would you feel? This is exactly being in the maze. Yeah, by being in the maze, you may feel very, I don't know, anxious. So the same happens when we have these urban sprawls. And when we are talking about urban sprawls, we means that more forests, more deserts, more natural environments are starting to be demolished. So the urban environments grow, and definitely that have impacts on human beings. Our brain are meant to be in natural environments. And unfortunately, nowadays we stay in homes. There's a very interesting metaphor in which that that we humans are living more inside houses rather than the walls outside the water. Though we believe that the walls are always in the water, but if you calculate the proportions, we are more in the, I don't know, these closed spaces rather than the walls being in the air.
Yeah,
Yeah,
maybe
true.
that's like just a reflection of where we are emotionally as people. So how do you think today's cities are a reflection of who we are emotionally, or who we are afraid of becoming? Now that we talked about the impact of mirror architecture in environment and all that.
Yeah, true. Um, I think both in Japan and Iran, one of the first design sketches I ask my students to do is that to um, make a sketch of their bedrooms and also take a picture of them and think about why they put this here and the other one that. And I got to know that each room is a very good reflection of the man or women who lives in that room. So this is exactly the same for the city as well. This is very much the reflection of our character, let's say. So if you walk in a city that it is green and I don't know, full of open spaces and colorful and happy, so you got to understand that okay, maybe these people. So it's a kind of Winston Churchill's famous statement: "We as humans design environments, and vice versa. These environments design us." So it's a cycle.
Eventually become what we put out there. Okay, so I think my last question would be, how can designers advocate for mental health and sustainability in systems driven by speed, cost, and profit?
Okay, if I understand your question well, you mean that how can we find the balance between this budget and this kind of stuff from one way and the other with sustainability and neuroarchitecture? Uh, I think this is the responsibility of us as designers to find the balance between these two things. Sometimes we misunderstood that. Suppose that I remember that we are asked to design a school or to renovate and refurbish a school here in Shiraz. And then when we have discussion sessions with the teachers, with the students, and the principal, we got to know that there are some paradoxical things. For example, they they were some small schools, and what they find they want is that to reduce the budget for the refurbishment and also the lighting and these kind of stuffs. And also they want us to also reduce the degree of the class to make it more sustainable. This is very interesting, but in the same time we got to know, when we interviewed with the students, we got to know that they needed this daylight and they need a more comfortable degree rather than just this comfort zone that are being prescribed in the standards. And then we are in this paradoxical position that we should understand that, okay, maybe reducing 2 degrees may reduce the economic budget for the school, but what would happen for the human resources that are being studied there? Uh, is it a right thing to do to reduce 2 degrees, or maybe we should think about this also mental well-being and physical well-being of the students? So we should find the balance point between these two sometimes contradictory paradigms, I guess.
Because I think most of the time, sometimes clients or whoever engages the architect is always on the feel that these systems are quite expensive to implement. So maybe
True.
that's another problem there.
Yeah, maybe they don't understand the hidden expenses that by this cheap design they would suffer later.
Yeah, it's a case of paying it forward.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. No, thank you very much, Dr. Fattahi. How do I pronounce your name again?
Kaveh at the beginning, Kaveh and Fattahi.
Kaveh?
Yes, and Fattahi.
Okay.
Perfect. You pronounce it very well, Lorata. And for your name is
Okay.
Nonofo,
Thank
yeah?
you very much. Yeah, Lorato
Lorato
Nonofo.
Nonofo? Do I pronounce it well? Lorato
Yes.
Nonofo?
Yes.
Okay.
Very well.
Okay.
Very well. Thank you very much for your time.
The same for me. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk about neuroarchitecture and how we designers should think regarding what our designs have impact and influence on our brain and body.
Yes, thank you very much. I believe next time when I engage you, it will be on a specific condensed topic, not as broad as it is right now. So I look forward to that also.